Mr. Night Terror. Love a good horror story just as much as my daredevils do. However, sometimes you don't need fiction to feel the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Sometimes true life is absolutely terrifying. There are monsters among us, moving around unnoticed, seemingly normal, but they are capable of unspeakable evil. From 1978 to 1991, the streets of Milwaukee were not the pleasant, safe streets they used to be. Instead, a monster lurked on these streets, ready to attack and destroy its prey. What monster was this, you might ask? American serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, who is also known as the Milwaukee Monster, or the Milwaukee Cannibal. He captivated this beautiful city and filled it with fear. By the time Dahmer was convicted in 1991, he had killed 17 men in the most hair-raising manners. As a result, he was sentenced to 16 life sentences, but was killed by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, in 1994. So what could have happened to awaken such a horrific creature within Jeffrey Dahmer? To fully understand the truth behind the monster, we need to go back. Way back to the days when Dahmer was merely a boy. Born on the 21st of May 1960 to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer, Jeffrey was described as a happy, energetic, ordinary little boy. However, all of this changed when he was 4 years old. The boy had a double hernia corrective surgery, and afterward, he became noticeably withdrawn. This resulted in his teen years being lonely and friendless. Years later, Dahmer admitted that his obsession with murder and necrophilia began around 14 years of age. Drawn to the bottle, he dropped out of university after only a quarter term. Disappointed, his father instructed him to join the army, and soon after, Dahmer was on his way to Germany. However, his alcoholic tendencies took over, and he didn't last long in the army. By 1981, he was discharged and returned to his father's home. A disorderly conduct arrest was the final straw with his father, who kicked him out. Dahmer moved in with his grandmother, who lived in Wisconsin, and in the next 2 years he was arrested twice for indecent exposure. But, of course, unbeknownst to anyone, he had already killed his first victim by that time. In 1978, a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks was picked up by Dahmer. And sadly for Stephen, this was the last time he would ever hitchhike again. Jeffrey took Stephen to his parents' home and got him drunk. Everything was fine until Stephen wanted to leave. Dahmer got angry and strangled him. Not knowing what to do with Stephen's remains, Dahmer dismembered the body and placed the body parts in plastic bags and buried it all in his parents' backyard. Interestingly, Dahmer didn't kill again until 9 years later. In 1987, Dahmer booked a hotel room with Stephen Tuomi. After getting drunk and passing out, Dahmer woke up to find Tuomi dead. Unsure of what had happened that night, But sure that he had caused the other man's death, Dahmer put Tuomi's body in a suitcase and transported it to his grandmother's house. There he dismembered the body and buried it in his grandmother's backyard. In the next year, Dahmer killed 2 more men and buried them in his grandmother's yard. By then, Granny had enough of her grandson's drunken nights, kicking him out of the house. Now, just imagine Granny's reaction if she knew what her drunken grandson was really up to. Dahmer had a very close call with the law in 1989 after charges were filed because of his involvement with a 13-year-old boy. He was charged with the 2nd-degree sexual assault and sexual exploitation of a minor. Although he pleaded guilty, his defense was that the boy seemed much older than his mere 13 years. He was granted parole while awaiting his trial and sentencing, and he lived with his grandma yet again, which was very unfortunate for his next victim, Anthony Sears. Now, Anthony had dreams of becoming a model. However, Dahmer put an end to these dreams by assaulting and killing Anthony in a gruesomely violent manner. As was habit, Dahmer disposed of Anthony's body by dismembering and burying his remains in the garden. When Dahmer's sexual exploitation of a minor began in 1989, Dahmer confidently argued his own defense. He shared with the court about seeing the error in his ways and considered his arrest as a true wake-up call. The court was satisfied, and his sentence was light, with Dahmer receiving 1 year imprisonment with day release. Now, this meant that Dahmer was still free to leave the prison premises during daylight hours to go to work, but he had to return by nightfall. Finally, after 10 months of day release incarceration, Dahmer was released, and he was ready to fully satisfy his appetite for murder. Now, from his release in 1989 to 1991, Dahmer killed 13 men, raising his victim count to 17. With every murder, he became more confident and experimental with the disposal of the remains. He also started consuming his victims' flesh. Dahmer had turned into an utterly gruesome madman, torturing his victims by giving them lobotomies and injecting them with muriatic acid while they were still fighting for their lives. On the 27th of May 1991, Dahmer had another close encounter. One of Dahmer's victims escaped and was spotted by a neighbor while running naked down the street. The victim was a 14-year-old boy, but he was also the brother of the boy who Dahmer assaulted and served time for. Sadly, when the police arrived and questioned Dahmer, he convinced them that the boy was his 19-year-old lover, and they left the boy in Dahmer's care. However, caring for the boy was never on Dahmer's mind. Dahmer killed the boy and consumed his flesh. Before his arrest on the 22nd of July 1991, Dahmer tortured and killed 4 more men. What events led to the arrest of the Milwaukee cannibal, you might wonder? On what seemed like just an ordinary day, 2 police officers saw an African-American man wandering the streets. They stopped the man when they noticed that he had handcuffs hanging from his wrists. The man led them back to Dahmer's apartment, telling them that some weird dude had drugged and restrained him. Now, they weren't prepared for what they'd find in the apartment. In Dahmer's refrigerator, they found body parts, and in his home were several Polaroid photographs of the men he killed. Later, police found 3 heads in the freezer and another one in the fridge. There was also a massive selection of genitalia and skulls floating in liquid in jars. Now, Dahmer's trial stretched from the beginning of January until the 15th of February 1992. Since most of his victims were African American men, the court was concerned about racial attacks on Dahmer, which resulted in bulletproof barriers surrounding Dahmer during the entire trial. Even though Dahmer had confessed to all the murders during interrogations before the trial, he pleaded not guilty because of insanity. After a 5-week trial, however, the jury wasn't convinced, and Dahmer was considered to be fully aware of the horrific acts and the nature of them while committing each murder. As a result, he was sentenced. Initially, he was given 15 life sentences, but then in May 1992, another life sentence was added. Now, although Dahmer seemed to adjust well to prison life, an altercation with fellow inmate Christopher Scarver cost him his life after only 2 years behind bars. The unspeakable acts of this man left a scar on the community that would be hard to heal. So hard, in fact, that a group of Milwaukee locals bought all his killing items in 1996. Even though it cost them a pricey $400,000, they bought it so that they could destroy it and set the city free of his horrific presence. Since most people are baffled by the cruelty of Dahmer, several books have been written about his life. In addition, a number of movies have been made to showcase his brutality. Now, some of Dahmer's quotes still horrify people because they illustrate his complete disregard for human life and his inability to show remorse for the lives he took. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Night Terror, as we explored the truth behind the monster Jeffrey Dahmer. If there is a serial killer that you would like to see featured in my Truth Behind the Monster episodes, be sure to comment in the sections below. Now, daredevils, until we meet again, embrace the shivers.